Shalom Zion. Shalom, my mishpaka. Bukatu to you on this morning. Shalom to the older brother, Yahudah, who is the lion, the scepter, who a lawgiver shall not leave or pass from between his feet. To the younger brother, Ephraim, who is the ox, whose horns has pushed around all nations, and indeed, who has become all nations, who has become the completion of the nations, who has indeed become a robe of many colors, a varied colored tonic. Shalom to you, younger brother, to the prodigal son. Shalom to the stranger who has awakened in this season and who has come out of paganism, who has come out of the lies, who has thrown down your idols, who has forsaken the lies of your fathers, of your forefathers, of your parents, and who has come running out of paganism and who has grabbed a hold to the garment of the house of Yaakov, and who has indeed engrafted yourself into the house of Yaakov, whereby now you are no longer considered a stranger or a goyim, or a heathen, or a swine, or dog, but you are indeed considered a fellow Yasharite and are indeed privy to the same covenants and the same promise and the same inheritance that were given to Yasharal and to Yasharal alone. Shalom, shalom to you, my family, my mishpaka worldwide, wherever you are on this yom. Shalom, shalom to you, Buka Tov to you on this yom. My mishpaka, I just want to speak to you briefly on this yom about something that's been heavily, very, very heavy on my ruach. And it's been that way for quite some time. It has perplexed me to some degree. It has burdened me to some degree, and it's just caused me to ponder deeply. And that is, what is it about sex? What is it about sex, and why is this thing? Why is it so heavily enforced upon our society at every level, everywhere you turn? I mean, every time you turn on the news, or every time you read a news article, it's right before your face. Sex and lust is right before our faces. Many of you, if you read any news articles at any link, I don't really read them. I look at the titles of them and I kind of discern where it's going to go from there. But lately, there's been a rash of teachers molesting or having sex with their students. There's been a rash of this. Many of you have followed where the sex scandals have come out in Hollywood, the wood of a holly tree. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Everywhere in our society, it is everywhere. And I dare say that in this season, there is no greater temptation than sex, than this lustful ruach of sex that is permeating every segment of our society. But the question is why? Why is there such a concerted effort to cause society to fall over into sexual sin? Why? Why? What is going on, Zion? What is going on? It's something that I'm feeling in my ruach, that I'm discerning. Let me erase feeling, that I'm discerning in my ruach, that we need to be aware of. and that we need to be leery of, because there is something going on in the atmosphere. This season is unlike any season that I have ever seen, with respect to the temptation of sex and lust. Unlike I've ever seen. Now, this thing was unleashed back in the 60s. This rock was unleashed first back in the 60s, with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, and with pornography, the birth of pornography. Coming about, and the sexual innuendos in Hollywood, and uh, the free sex era, with the rock and roll concerts, the drugs, and the sex. All of this rock was unleashed upon not only this nation but the world back in the 60s. But this thing has grown stronger. It has grown stronger, Zion, such that it is even affecting our kids. Our kids are even full of lust when they are yet 9 and 10 years old and maybe younger. What is going on, Zion? What is going on? What is it about sex? What is it about this thing? What is it about sex that the satanic elite and the fallen ones are pushing this thing on us through our eyes, through our ears, and through our eye gates? Why is there such a concerted effort to push this thing on us? Why, Zion? What is going on? What is going on? I want to briefly look at that. Y'all put some things into my ruach this morning, because I've been pondering on it. And I've been asking him and seeking him. And I didn't have to seek him long, Zion. I didn't have to seek him long on this before he deposited some things into my ruach. And so I just want to share a few of those things with you on this yom. But I want to start with reading Ka'eretiyim Alaf, that is 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, verses 15 through 20. I want to start there. I want to start with Shaul's exhortation, or Shaul's admonishment to us to flee from sexual sin, to run from sexual sin. He gives us a warning here. He doesn't. He kind of goes into detail, but you have to have discernment. You have to have the ruach of the Most High to kind of understand where he's going here. But we're going to start right here, and then we're going to build upon this. We're going to allow the ruach to build upon this, to give us some deeper understanding and some deeper context as to why this is being pushed on us, unlike any other season in this season. So beginning at verse 15, it reads, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Mashiach? Shall I then take the members of Mashiach and make them members of a whore? Let it not be. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a whore is Hachad, one body, Achad, one body?" That's very key. For he says the two shall become Achad, one flesh. And he who is joined to the master is one Ruach. Flee whoring. Every sin that a man does is outside the body. But he who commits whoring sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set-apart Ruach who is in you, which you have from Yahuwah, and you are not your own? For you were bought with a price. Therefore esteem Yahuwah in your body and in your Ruach, which are of Yahuwah. Before we get into that, I want to go back to the very beginning. I want to go back to the very beginning with Adam and Hawa. With Adam and Hawa, and I want to add some context. I want to add some context. Many of you know who have studied scripture at any length, you understand that Adam and Hawa were created perfect. First, Adam created in the image of Yahuwah. Created in the image of Yahuwah. This means that Adam had the very nature of Yahuwah. He had his very bright nature. He had a bright nature. He shone as Yahuwah shone. He could. It is written in the forgotten books of Eden or Adon that he could see Shamayim. He could see it clearly. He could see the messengers ascending and descending. There was no veil. There was no separation because he had the very nature of Yah. He had his bright nature, thus he could commune with him at any time. At any time. There was no separation. They talked with one another because he had his bright nature. He had his bright nature. Hawa, in turn, was taken out of Adam, and she was created in the image of Adam, of man. Therefore, she too was created in the image of Yahuwah, because Adam was created in the image of Yahuwah, and so she too had that very same bright nature. She too had that very same bright nature. And in having that bright nature, they were achad. They both were achad with Yahuwah. They were achad with him in ruah. They were achad with him. They were one with him, one ruah. There was no separation. There was one ruah. They had his bright nature. They had no need to eat in the physical sense that you and I think. Sure, the tree, they could eat of every tree, but I need you to understand that it wasn't in the physical sense. Those very same trees, there would be trees that were aligning the river that is going to flow from the Hakal, that is going to flow from underneath the Hakal, that is going to flow from underneath the tree of life, that is going to flow, and and when it flows, it's going to heal the nations. And there are trees that are going to grow on either side of it, and these trees are for healing, and they're going to bear fruit every month, and this is going to be our food. But you understand that when we are resurrected in renewed bodies, being restored back to our natural state, back to the state that we were created in, the state of Adam and Hawa, our bright nature, as it is written in the book of YAHUAH'S Allah, that we do not yet know what we will be, but we know, but when we see him, we will see him as he is, because we will be as he is. We will have his bright nature once again. And so this food, I need you to understand, it's not in the physical sense, it's spiritual food. It's spiritual food. And so they had his bright nature. They had his bright nature. And so they had no need for physical food like we need physical food. They didn't have a need for water in the sense that we need water. And they had no need for sex. They had no need for sex. Now, the animals, on the other hand, were created to procreate that way through the act of sex, through the act of coming together and becoming one in that way, but not mankind. Not mankind, not originally. We were not originally created to procreate that way. To procreate that way. Sex is a condition of our fallen state. Oh yes, we fall into the state of like animals. This is what animals were created to do, and we've fallen to even that state. Do you hear me? We've fallen to even that state of being like animals. Animals could also talk before the fall, before we were all kicked out of Adon. They could speak, they could talk, and it is my belief that when things are restored, that they are once again going to speak again. They're going to speak again. They indeed have nefesh. They have souls. They have nefesh. They have breath. They have life. They have ruach. The same as we do. And that's why it is written in the book of Yobelim that for whomever mistreats them, they're going to accuse them. these animals are going to accuse them at the time of judgment. They are going to accuse them. And so we also need to be careful how we treat animals. We need to be careful how we treat them. That was a reason that he gave the animals for our redemption. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin, because a soul had to die for a soul for a soul, a firstborn soul for a firstborn soul. Um, it couldn't have been some inanimate object. It had to be a soul for a soul. They have souls, Zion. They have souls. They're going to be animals in the reign, in the new reign, in the renewed reign. And they're going to accuse everybody who have mistreated them. Nevertheless, this video is not about that. I just needed to add some context that sex is a result of our fallen state. Adam and Kuah were created to have sex. They weren't created to have sex. Animals were. We're not. And so by having sex, we're in essence no different than them. We're higher than them, but in that area, we're like them. We are like them. We're also like them in that we both have breath. We both have ruach. Nevertheless, Adam and Kuah were not created this way. They were not created this way. And so when they fell, when they both fell, they still had some of their bright nature, but the majority of their bright nature had fallen. It is written in the forgotten books of Eden that they didn't even want to eat at first. They didn't want to eat. They didn't want to drink water. They didn't want to do anything that would cause them to fall further and further from their created state, from their bright state that they were created to be. They went days to the point that they almost died because they didn't want to eat and they didn't want to drink water, until Yahuwah told them, look, I've made a covenant with you, and at the end of that, in fulfillment of that covenant, in fulfillment of those days, first of all, I'm going to come and rescue you. I'm going to assume flesh, and I'm going to come to rescue you and your seed. And at the end of that covenant, then I am going to redeem you back to myself. But in the meantime, okay, now you got to eat. You have to eat and you have to drink, because the body that you have now is not the body that you had, that you were created to have. And so now you have to eat to survive, and you have to drink water to survive. And they finally began to eat. They finally began to eat. But with respect to the act of sex, they had no desire for it. They had no animalistic, and I repeat that, they had no animalistic lust or desire for sex. They didn't have it. Adam did not have a desire for sex until Hashatan came to him as a beautiful woman. He disguised himself as a very, very attractive and beautiful woman. And it reads in the forgotten books of Eden, this caused a fire to then burn within the heart of Adam. For Huah, it caused a fire to burn in the heart of Adam. It burned. It became a raging fire in his heart, and he wanted Huah like nobody's business. He wanted Huah by nobody's business. But I need you to understand that this was introduced into him via Hashatan. This animalistic lust was introduced into him via Hashatan. And so, but rather than go into Huah, he sought Yahuwah. He sought Yahuwah. And then Yahuwah then directed him in the correct way to do it, so that it was not counted or accredited to him as sin. And so Yahuwah then prescribed to him instructions on how to betroth Huah to himself, on how to betroth her. He brought Huah gifts. He gave her gold and myrrh and frankincense. And you see, that's why there's a bride's price that is to be paid. This is the betrothed price. And in the Torah is 50 pieces of silver. But in the beginning, Adam betrothed Huah to himself, where he gave her gold and silver and myrrh and frankincense. And then there was a period, a waiting period, and then he went into her. And then he went into her and they became one. They became ahad. They became one flesh. But this had to be accomplished so that it wasn't accredited, or so that it wasn't accounted to accredited to Adam as being sin, as being sin, as it is written. Um, Marriage is honorable above all, and the marriage bed undefiled. It is undefiled. It does not mean you can do whatever you want to do in the marriage bed. What that means is you don't defile it by whoredom. You don't defile it by adultery. You don't defile it that way. That doesn't mean you can engage in oral sex or anal sex or threesomes or whatever kinds of debauchery that your fleshly mind can think of, that your fleshly, lustly mind can think of. That's not what it means. What it means is that you don't defile that union, that you don't defile that covenant by going out and committing adultery. So marriage is honorable above all, and the marriage bed is undefiled. It's undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers, Yahuwah will judge. Yahuwah will judge. And so, again, as long as marriage is done the correct way, within the confines of marriage, doing it the correct way, then it's not counted against us. It's not counted against us. But again, we need to understand that sex is a result of our fallen state. It is a result of our fallen state. It is a result of sin. Hence, in the wilderness, whenever seed was spilled from a man into a woman, then they were both unclean until evening. Uncleanness and sin is synonymous. They were unclean until evening. They were to bathe and they were to be unclean unto evening. And this was to teach us the difference between the clean and the unclean, so that we were to make a distinction between righteousness and unrighteousness, what was considered sin and what was considered righteousness. So it was in this teaching, Yah was teaching us to make a difference between the clean and the unclean. But nevertheless, the fact remains is it is considered unclean. It is considered unclean. Now, we have been once and for all cleansed by the shed blood of Hamashiach. And if you have undergone the mikvah Tabalah, if you have been bathed, if you have been washed, then he doesn't consider us unclean anymore, and there is no more uncleanness in us. However, if you're engaging in the act of sex and not bathing, then we need to talk offline, because that's still nasty, and you need to be washing yourself after sex. But the point is, it is considered unclean because it is a condition of our fallen state, of our fallen sinful state, which we were not created originally to do. So Hashatan, he tempted Adam into animalistic lust, into procreating like the animals do, into having sex like the animals do. And the more we engage in this outside of the marriage bed, the more we resemble animals. The more we resemble animals, the lower and lower we go underneath the feet of Hashatan, to where finally we are no different than animals. If you're just jumping from female to female and man to man like animals do, you're no different than animals. You're no different than animals, and you're sinking lower and lower. And instead of being the head, you are indeed the tail, under the subjection of Hashatan. And rather than being born from above, to where we are citizens of above, to where now we have dominion over serpents and scorpions and over all the powers of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall hurt us, you are still under his subjection. You are still underneath his feet. No different than animals. Lower and lower. No different than animals. Having that same animalistic desire. Having that same animalistic lust. Nevertheless, I don't want to make this video too long. But the more we do that, the further from our bright nature we fall. We fall until finally we're no different than beasts. Finally, we are no different than beasts. So with all that said, though, what is it about sex, though? What is it about it? What is it about it? And in the very in the scripture that I read, Shaul declares that we become akkad. We become akkad. If you lay with a whore, you become akkad with that whore. You become akkad with that whore. You become akkad with her. You become akkad with whomever we lay with whomever we lay with. But before I dig deeper into that, why then is this thing, sex, has such a hold on people? Why does lust have such a grab on us? That rock of lust that tempt us into sexual sin, into sexual sin. And why is it perhaps, excuse me, the most potent weapon that the enemy uses against us? Forgive me if I appear like I'm jumping all over the place, because I'm speaking as the Ruach gives me utterance in this, and I've made a few notes, but I haven't studied this thing, is what I'm telling you. I haven't studied this. I'm speaking as the Ruach gives me utterance. I'm speaking as the Ruach gives me utterance. But why is it perhaps the most potent weapon that he uses? Why does it have such a stronghold on us? Why does it have such a stronghold on us? It was so potent. It was so potent that when the sons of Cain were separated, and they were under the subjection of Hashatan, and Hashatan began to teach them. He began to expose them to animalistic lust and passion, and he began to expose them to demonic music and idolatry. He began to expose them to these things. But the sons of Shaif, who were still on the mountain of Yah, but who were below the garden of Eden, they could not get back up there, but they were yet still on the mountain of Yah. This thing was so powerful that, and I want to make this point. Up until this point, the sons of Shaif, all they did was worship the Most High Yah. Is worship the Most High Yah in Ruach and in truth. This is what they did day in, day out, with fasting and praying. This is all they did, remaining pure to Him, remaining innocent to Him. This is all they did. But when the sons of Cain began to grow, and then Shaitan began to teach them music, demonic music, the different notes of demonic music. There are notes, Zion. There are different notes that have different impacts and effects on our nefash that draw us. This is why many are drawn by this demonic music, by the beats of it. It draws these demonic beats. They draw, and then enters the demonic words, and they draw and they enter into our nefash, into your nefash, if you're listening to this stuff, and further draw you into sin, and further draw us into lust. And when lust has been conceived, and and when it gives birth, when sin is born, when it is conceived, I'm paraphrasing here, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is full grown, it leads to death. It leads to death, because the wages of sin is death. But it begins by allowing that stuff to come in through our eye gates and our ear gates, allowing that stuff to come in, listening to that demonic music in the first place, and allowing it to come in and to set up root in our hearts and in our nefash. So the sons of Cain were no different. They began to play this music and dance and debauchery and have sex orgies and idolatry, and they began to paint themselves. They began to paint themselves and make themselves look attractive, and they began to dye their clothes, making themselves look attractive. And for an instance, the sons of Shaif took their eyes off of Yah and began to look down off the mountain at them and to listen to their music, and some of them were drawn down. They were drawn down to them. And despite the warnings from the elders of the sons of Shaif, from Shaif himself, from Chanosh, and from Hinan, and from Hanuk, commonly called Enoch, they went down. They went down amongst them, and they could never return. And they could never return. This is a warning. This is a warning. They could never return. They could never return. There is a point, Zion, to where Yahuwah will give us up to a reprobate mind, and where we could never return. To where we can never return, like they could never return. There is a point of no return. There is a point of no return. Hashatan knows this, and he uses this lustful ruach, this ruach of lust and sex, to get us to that point of no return, of no return. And why is this a key interest point? Why is sex a key interest point to that point of no return, of no return? Well, one reason is once you give over to that ruach of lust, any type of lust, it can never be satisfied. It can never be satisfied. It's only going to want more and more and more and more. If you're addicted to sexual lust, if you're addicted to women, sooner or later, you're going to try both women and men. And then sooner or later, you're going to go to children. Sooner or later, you're going to go to animals. Sooner or later, you're going to go to whatever. You're going to go to wherever. You're going to try whatever, because that lustful ruach cannot be satisfied. It cannot be satisfied. It has an insatiable appetite. It's going to keep wanting more and more and more and more until it destroys you, until you're at that point of no return where you're given up to a reprobate mind, which Shaul talks about in Romans, the first chapter. The first chapter. But what is it about it? What is a deeper context? What is it about it? What is it about it? And here's where Yahuwah gave me revelation. Here's where he gave me revelation. You see, not unlike with the Most High Yah, not unlike with the Most High Yah, when the Ruach HaKodesh enters us, hear me, when he enters us, the operative word is enter. When he enters us, we become achad, one with Yahuwah. We become his bride. We become his bride. Oh, yes. If you have not had the immersion of the Ruach HaKodesh, now again, I'm not here to discourage anybody, because there are levels, different levels of the immersion of the Ruach HaKodesh. There are different levels of it. There are different levels. Case in point is when he sent his 12 and the 70 out in the book of Lucas, and they could heal the sick and cast out devils. You can't heal the sick and cast out devils without having some level of the Ruach HaKodesh in you. You cannot do it. Another instance is in the book of Yahuchanan, after the resurrection of Hamashiach. After the resurrection of Hamashiach, when he appeared in the midst of them, of all 12 of them, or 11 at that time, when he appeared in the midst of them, and the text says he breathed on them, and he said, "Receive my ruach, receive my ruach." Then we find in Acts 1, he says, I'm commanding you to go to Jerusalem and wait for the promise that the Father said he will send, the helper. He says that you will be for surely Yahuchanan immersed in water, but in not many days from now, you will be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh, who will immerse you in fire. You will be immersed in fire, and you will have power. You will have power. And we see in the second chapter of Acts where they were immersed in the fire baptism of the Ruach HaKodesh. Even after that, after Yahuchanan and Kapha were beaten, or it may have been after the point where they were in prison. I think it was after the point where they were beaten, and they went back with Simcha and to the rest of the assembly, and they prayed for more boldness, and the text says that they were filled. So I need you to understand that it is a gradual filling. It is a gradual filling. We are taken from esteem to esteem. It is a gradual filling. Nevertheless, the point is, if he hasn't entered you at any point, you're not married. You're not his. You're not married to him. You're not married to him. We are not married to him. So when the Ruach enters us, He marries us. He becomes one with us. He becomes achad. He becomes one flesh. Do you understand? We become one flesh with him. We become married. We become one flesh. Hence, Shaul tells us to flee from sexual sin, because when we enter a whore, we become achad with her. We become one. We become one flesh. When we enter our ashas, we become one with them. We become one flesh. When we enter any other woman or man, even if you enter a man, for homosexuals, and I don't believe any are listening to this video, for homosexuals, when they enter a man, or when a man enters them, they become achad, one with that man. One, yes. There is even a oneness, a supernatural bind with them. They become one flesh, one flesh. And here's what I need you to understand. Here is revelation. You and I are the Yahid. We are the Yahid. We are the only begotten son of Yahuwah. We are the only begotten son. You see, as in the very beginning, when Yahuwah made the promise to Adam, he made a covenant with him and a promise, promising him that he was going to, in time, that he was going to put on flesh, the flesh of men, of mankind, and that he was going to come down himself and rescue him and his seed. And rescue him and his seed. So with that understanding, we understand that Yahuwah, is deliverance, was not the literal son of Yahuwah. He is Yahuwah. He is Yahuwah. He came as the only begotten son of Yahuwah. He came as us. He came as a representative of us and died as us and died as his son. Thus his blood was counted as our blood. Yahushua is not some trinity. There is no trinity. Yahuwah, our Eluah, is one. He is achad. He is one. He is one. We are the only begotten son. We are the son of Eluah. We are the only begotten son. Thus, as the only begotten son of Eluah, as the Yahad is the only begotten son, created in his very image, as the Ruah enters us and we become Ahad, married to our Eluah, when we, as the only begotten son, enter a woman, we marry them, we enter them, we literally, hear me, we literally enter them like the Ruah enters us supernaturally. There is a supernatural bond. Our Ruah, our Nafash becomes joined. Our Ruah enters them. Our Nafash enters them. It becomes one, intertwined. Do you hear me? There is a supernatural purpose to it. There is a supernatural purpose to it. When we enter them, not unlike when the Ruah enters us, we enter them in the same way, and we become joined supernaturally. We become Ahad. We become one. We become one. Zion. Whoredom is a grave sin. It is a grave sin. It is a grave sin. Whoredom is a grave sin. Shaul says, flee from whoredom. Flee from sexual immorality. It is a grave sin. Yahuwah, it is so grave that Yahuwah considers idolatry. He equates idolatry with that sin with whoredom. He equates it with whoredom. Why? Why? Because, Zion, when we sink to that state, we're no longer worshiping Yahuwah. We're worshiping the wicked one, the very one who introduced animalistic lust into the hearts of men. We are worshiping the wicked one. Not only are we worshiping him, but when we become achad with a woman, when we become achad with her, we are in, especially in the form of whoredom, then we are inviting those ruach cults to become akkad with us. To become akkad with us. Whatever ruach cults are attached to whomever we're laying with, whatever ruach cults are attached to them, those ruach cults, but then become attached to our nafash, because this is a supernatural exchange. I need you to understand it. This is a supernatural exchange. Those same ruach cults that are attached to whomever, they become one with us. Thus, we are inviting them. We are voluntarily inviting those ruach cults into us, and we are voluntarily submitting to them and worshiping them. And thus, the same way the ruach into us, those ruachs into us, and they become married to us. They become our luahim. And the more we engage in this act, the more of them that come into us. The more of them come into us. The more of them enter us, and the lower we fall, and the more we become into subjection with them, and the more we worship them. Again, sin is mentioned in the same breath as whoredom. In the same breath as whoredom. Sin, idolatry, is mentioned in the same breath as idolatry, as whoredom. Why? Because when we worship other mighty ones, Zion, hear me, and I briefly just spoke about this. When we worship other mighty ones, the same way the Ruach of Yah enters us, these demon Ruachs enter us when we worship them. It doesn't matter if you're bowing down to an idol. It doesn't matter. Even if you're bowing down to an idol and you're submitting to that idol. When you submit to that idol, the Ruach or Ruach cults that are attached to that idol, they enter you. They enter you. They become one with you. In the same way, when we bow down to Yah, when we worship Him, and Ruach, and in truth, His Ruach enters us. If we bow down to idols, the same way that His Ruach enters us, those Ruachs enter us. And one of the quickest ways, and one of the biggest deceptions, because a lot of people won't bow down to idols, but they will have sex with multiple sex partners. And this is a deception. You know, they won't worship physical idols, but they don't know when they have sex with multiple sex partners in the act of whoredom, they're still inviting these ruach cults into their bodies more quickly than by bowing down to an idol. More quickly, because they are more active in a human body. And so when we enter another human being, when we enter an ash, or when a homosexual enters another man, or when an animal enters a woman, or when a man enters an animal, the same thing occurs. Those ruachs have a direct path to become akkad, with us. And the more of them that are in us, the lower and lower we sink, to the point to where they have complete control over your mind, to the point to where you're giving up to a reprobate mind. This is what they want to induce us into. This is what they want to induce us into. When we disobey Yah, Zion, and engage in sex outside of the covenant of marriage, we are obeying fallen ones, and they enter us this way. They enter us the same way the Ruach of the Most High enters us. Enter. They enter us when we enter a woman. But if it is ordained by Yah, if it has been set apart by Yah, when we enter, they cannot enter us. First of all, when you marry someone, again, it should be a relative, someone with the same mindset. Wherefore come out from among them, be ye separate, touch not the unclean thing, and Yah will receive us. We are not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. We are to yoke ourselves with a believer, with a relative, with someone who has the same father, who has the same Ruach And thus they are our sister or our brother. And so when we enter them, we have the same ruach, the ruach of the Most High. We become stronger. We become stronger. We become one. Two are better than one. We become stronger. One can put 1,000 to flight, two, 10,000 to flight. We become stronger. We become stronger in ruach. Stronger in ruach. And this is something that the Most High ordains. This is something that the Most High ordains. And so sex is not just sex, Zion. It is not just sex. It is supernatural. It is powerful. It is so powerful that it calls 200 watchers to leave their assignment and descend the earth to get a taste of it. Oh yes, it's just that powerful. And that's why our airways are flooded with it, to get us to get it to enter, to conceive, and to be born, and to when it is full grown, and when it turns to sin, it causes death. It causes death, and it allows them to enter us. That is a direct pathway for them to enter us, and it brings us further and further and further and further from our bright nature to where we are no different than animals. This is what they were created to do. This is what they were created to do. Sex, there is a supernatural property of sex. It is powerful. We enter the same way the Ruach enters us. We enter. Remember, we are sons of the Most High Yah. We are Yahid. We are the Yahid. We are the only begotten Son. And so when we enter, there is something supernatural that takes place. No different than when the Ruach enters us. You see, the occult understand this, Zion. They understand it. That's why in every pagan religion, sex is a major part of it. Sex is a major part of it. Sex magic is a major part of it. They understand it, Zion. Witches, they understand sex magic. It makes them powerful. Demons enter them this way. They want more demons into them because it gives them more power. So they engage in sex magic. They engage in sex magic, and I don't care what form of paganism it is. The worship of, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to say them, I'm going to spell them. The worship of Baal. Sex magic takes place. In the worship of Moleck, sex magic takes place. In the worship of Asherah, sex magic takes place. I don't care what form of paganism it is. Sex magic is a main party of the worship. A main party of the worship, because they understand the supernatural aspect of sex, that when we enter another person, we enter that person the same way the Ruach enters us, because we are the Yahid. We are the only begotten Son of the Most High Yah. And so the same way when we enter a person, we enter them. And when we enter them, if there is already other Ruach hosts in them, those Ruach hosts, they're attached to us. They attach to us. Moreover, when we engage in whoredom, when we engage in illicit sex, this invokes those Ruach hosts, Zion. This invokes them. This is why pagans use it, because it invokes them. It invokes fallen ones. It invokes demons. Remember, Hashatan introduced this into the world. Hashatan aroused that animalistic lust in the heart of Adam. He introduced this. And so when we engage in illicit sex, it invokes them. And so even if that person may not have them, you still invoke them, and they can still enter you that way. They can still enter you that way. Our society is full of subliminal and non-subliminal messages with respect to sex and lust to get us to fall into this grave sin. Set yourself apart to the Most High Yah. Make sure your garments are clean. Shut down all this demonic music. Shut down demonic television. If your one eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Don't even stare in this wicked society. Turn your head away. Do not allow them, do not allow temptation to enter. Lean on the Ruach HaKodesh. Walk in the Ruach of the Most High so that you do not give in to the desires of this wicked, nasty flesh. There's an agenda, Zion. There's an agenda. And I don't know if there's any more powerful a Ruach in our society during this season. Pride is another one. Pride is another one. I originally said that pride is the strongest Ruach that is impacting the house of Zion, but I would say pride is one and lust is 1A. It's 1A. Very, very powerful Ruachs. Very, very powerful Ruachs. Remember, it was pride that caused Hashatan to fall. It was pride that caused Hashatan to fall. It was lust and sex that caused our ancestors to fall. Because when they began to intermingle with these pagan nations and become akkad with them, and such that these demons were introduced into them, were transferred into them, they began to worship these false deities. They began to worship these demons. And when they began to worship those demons in the same way that we worship Yah, then those demons entered that way as well, through sex and through the acts of physically worshiping them and sacrificing their children to them. To finally, our Father had to disperse them. And here we are to this day, dispersed because of sex and lust, which introduced false worship, which brought about false worship. It is a grave sin. It is a grave, grave sin. A telltale sign of a demonized society is when they began to wear less and less clothes. This is a telltale sign of a demonized society, because when they began to wear less and less clothes, a tight and revealing clothing, this arouses that same fire in our hearts, that same animalistic passion, that same animalistic lust that was invoked in the heart of Adam. And so this is a telltale sign of a demonized society when they began to wear less and less clothes. Look where we're at, Zion. Look where we're at. Look through the annals of time where we started, and look where we're at in this season. In this season, where a piece of thread is considered clothing. It's considered clothing. In some instances, not even a piece of thread is considered clothing. They just go bare nude. Just bare nude. That's a telltale sign of a demonized society. You see, the people of Yah, we are commanded to cover ourselves up, and to not live as the Gentiles, and to not behave as the heathen do. You see, the heathen, they expose their shame, they expose their nakedness. But the people of Yah, we are to cover ourselves. We are to cover ourselves, such not as to live as the Gentiles, to behave as the heathen, as the pigs and the swine, and so as not to invoke that animalistic passion and lust in each other. In each other. It is supernatural, Zion. It is supernatural. Flee from sexual sin. Flee from whoredom. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a man commits outside of his own body, but sexual immorality a man commits against his own body. Do you not know that you are the temple of the Most High Yah? Do you not know that when you become achad with a whore, when you enter her, that you become achad with her supernaturally? The same way when the Ruach of the Most High enters us. Flee from sexual immorality. Flee from it and set yourself apart to the Most High Yah. Amen. Amen.